I made myself this new nightstand. I used 2 small sheets of 18mm plywood. Here I cut them down so that I could laminate it together. This will be used for the sides and the top. Whenever I laminate wood, I put an old piece of melamine underneath it. Wood glue doesn't stick to this. I didn't quite have enough wood to do all of these pieces as solid. So you can see here this one side is going to be 4 pieces stuck together. This is fine because this is going to be the side that I will put against the wall, so I can hide it quite nicely. I used most of my clamps to clamp up this melamine sandwich. This will be a problem later because I don't have very many clamps left. I was pretty nervous about gluing up this big sheet of plywood. I've never squeezed this much glue out in my life. I actually needed to make the hole of the glue bottle a little bit bigger. I did try the trick of adding some super glue to get it to quickly lock. I'm not sure it really helped. So the big question, how do I clamp this together? I don't have nearly enough clamps, especially because I already used most of them. So I basically put everything heavy I could find on top of this and left it to dry like that. Yes, that's an old paint bucket and a toolbox. And now that it's dry, get them all off again. So the glue up went pretty well. It actually held together. There were a few tiny gaps, but not too much. It was surprisingly successful. I basically trimmed off the edges and squared up each side. Notice here that I'm using some masking tape just to prevent any tear outs in the crosscuts. Because I don't yet have a good table extension for my saw, I'm using a piece of scrap wood just to balance things on. I set my table saw to 45 degrees for the miters. I, as you can see, use some more masking tape just to prevent tear out. It's not really recoverable at this stage if I do get a lot, so I need to be careful. I always do a dry fit just to make sure everything looks okay. I decided to use dowels to hold up the shelf. I used this cool 3D printed drill guide. It's got nice little dust collection pouch and a couple lines and markings so that you can line everything up nicely. It's come in handy quite a few times, especially when drilling into walls because of the dust collection. To make sure everything was the right size, I simply measured on the fly. This allows you to guarantee the correct depth. And when the moment takes you, awkwardly pick up your saw and rock out. Maybe that's why I'm quite fond of those Japanese handsaws. They're quite easy to do air guitar on. After another very successful dry fit, it's time to do that super fun task which occupies about 50% of these videos: sanding. I swear I do try and edit the sanding quite a lot, but there's just so much of it. I ended up with like 65 clips here, and at least half of it was sanding. I did work my way through all the grits here. I started at 80, then 180, and stopped at 320. Notice how much dust gets in the air while I'm sanding. I definitely need to sort that out sometime soon. I tend to take a lot of risks with how I place my boards on the table. I'm also very clumsy. This is a good combination. So yeah, that piece now has a bit of a dent at the back. You can't really see it though. I was super nervous about this glue up, I won't lie. There was no going back after this. And I only really had one shot because I didn't have any more wood. Okay, it worked out. I'm quite relieved. It actually turned out great. To cover up the plywood edges on the front, I decided to use some edge banding, some of this iron-on stuff. It's pretty cool and I got a pretty good color match. Something that I learned about edge banding here is that if you need to cover something that's wider than the edge band, you can use two strips. However, do be careful. Don't let them overlap, because although you might think that's a good idea, there's no good way of recovering that. I basically had to peel off my first attempt and do it again. If you place them next to each other, quite close together, while it's still warm, you can sort of push them into place, and it actually fills the gap almost completely. You can barely see that it's two sheets of edge banding. Once the edge banding is on, you can simply use a knife or a scraper to trim the excess, and then smooth it over with the iron. I don't know if you noticed, but my knife's blade is completely loose. I definitely need to get myself a new one. And then before we can apply any finish, another bout of sanding. Again, working my way through the grits, 80, 180, and finally 320 to make it nice and smooth. And then another first in this project, I decided to use tung oil to finish. This really brought the grain out in this nice hardwood ply. It actually looks absolutely stunning. Something I did learn is that edge banding definitely doesn't soak up tung oil, or probably any oil for that matter. And then for the legs, I started by cutting some square strips from this pine. I know my cross-cut sled isn't nearly as awesome as Tamar's, but hey, at least it's something. I made this small jig by sticking a 5-degree 3D printed wedge onto a piece of wood stuck on this melamine. This allowed me to cut the legs just at the perfect angle. I eyeballed the alignment, but later on I made sure that they were all the same length. I used pocket holes on the inside to mount the legs to the body. I often find it necessary to clean up the edges of the pocket holes with some sandpaper. I sprayed the legs black and gave them a coat of clear varnish. I used a piece of scrap wood as a spacer. I didn't really care exactly how far from the edge it was, as long as it was consistent. Finally, I wanted to add a drawer to this. I used my table saw to cut the groove for the base piece. I did this in my last video, and it worked out pretty well, so I decided to use the same technique. For the faceplate, I didn't want a proper hand grip. I wanted to cut out a little notch so that I could reach in and pull the drawer out. I needed to clean up the edges a little bit with some sandpaper, but it wasn't too much work. I gave the faceplate the same treatment as the legs. A coat or two of black spray paint, followed by some clear spray-on varnish. I really like this look. And now the glue up. I didn't mind adding some screws to hold things together because the faceplate was going to hide everything and they would only be visible from the back. To mount the faceplate, I simply eyeballed two equidistant holes in the back and pre-drilled and screwed in some screws. And finally, some more of that tung oil. It's so satisfying seeing a piece like this come together and actually fit as you intended. I'm so proud of this piece. I'm seriously super happy with it. I immediately went and put it to use. I didn't even take the time to record a little outro. I hope you really enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed building it. Remember to like and subscribe. Till next time.